everybody asks me all the time, how do you do what you do on your engine?
I'm just a guy that owns a truck, man.
What's going on, guys? You ain't gonna believe where I'm at. I had a little bit of time to kill, and well, waiting on the load. So I found myself here at Rawze's compound down here in Georgia. Better come out here and hang out with him. And well, figured we could wait for it. There's the man, the myth, the legend.
No. You know me, you let me loose with your truck, I'm gonna take some apart.
Absolutely.
I got my turbo box. You said you wanted me to play with my turbo box with you. Okay.
Yep. I've been waiting to see this.
Let's hook it up. And this is like generation number 3, I think. Yeah, generation number 3. Third generation of this box that I've designed here, kind of hobbled together out of an Arduino. We'll turn it on.
So what does this box do? I mean, what are we doing here?
This box checks the turbo. It manually moves it. It does a seek command. It'll calibrate the turbo. It'll check its boundaries to make sure it's it's got too much motor resistance one way or the other. It also shows the motor resistance, and it shows the PGN data, like the address claim data and all that stuff too. So it's a pretty cool little box. I worked on it. It took me a few months to make, design, build. I have a Arduino project.
See if I can get that in there. So much glare. That's super cool.
It's homemade. I mean, it's hot glue. It's some e-cigarette batteries. It's just kind of hodgepodge.
You got a little.
What else am I gonna? I had a day where I was bored.
That's pretty cool.
Anyway, so it sounds good so far. I mean, you hear that whine?
You get that mic right there.
That whine.
I can barely hear it.
Yeah.
Maybe the mic will pick it up.
Yeah, that means it's holding its position, whatever position that is. And usually it defaults to about 5% or so. And the first screen on this box that I have here, it shows the battery voltage of these batteries, not the truck.
Yeah.
And if I hit this button, it'll show all the address claim data. And that's this hexadecimal, weird EFF02, whatever, all this crazy hexadecimal stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's what this data actually decodes to this data here. It means J1939, its address ID is number 2, its manufacturer code is 1298 according to this. Unit serial number is 214359 supposedly. The manufacturer code, it says whole set. And then some other things. It looks like it's not it's not broadcasting. It probably doesn't need to. Yeah. And then like a ECU instance, function instance, vehicle system code, and then the vehicle instance. It's just an actuator. It's a turbo actuator.
That's pretty cool.
It's got this. It says right here. It says function code 133, which means actuator. So it's reporting it's an actuator. It's reporting it's a whole set. It's reporting its serial number and all the good data, so that we know it's talking and we know it's communicating. But you said the truck hasn't had any problems.
No.
It's just running. You just want me to play
Turbo's good, boost is good, everything's been good.
Yeah, well, I've already checked a little bit on it, and it's not perfect, but we'll get into that.
Oh God, here we go.
Yep.
Don't tell me that.
And so let's before we get into that though, you were asking me something about how I made or
yeah, I thought it'd be pretty cool for the channel to know. You guy that's doing all this stuff with the truck. I mean, you're not a trucker by first trade in your life. It's kind of like a second venture for you.
My wife's actually.
Your wife's?
Yeah, well, that's
she wanted to buy a truck, and wife always gets what wife wants.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, what was your career choice?
Many years from about age 12 or 13 years old, I had my own radio repair shop. Literally.
Yeah.
My grandparents owned a general store. I lived with them, and they actually built me on the side of their general store an actual separate little room with its own front entrance to do car stereo, VCR. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s, when I was a kid. And from there, I did CB radio repair, the big bad boy days of the 1980s and building the big watts and the 10,000 watt broadcast stations. I did all that. I was involved in all that. And then somebody came to me one time with an industrial machine and said, "Hey, can you fix this board for me?" I'm like, no, but I changed all the capacitors on it, see what happens. And next thing I knew, I was hooked on industrial machinery, got into automation. Back then it was all CNC.
Yeah.
So I started out repairing CNCs and then designing controls for CNCs with PCs, you know.
Yeah.
With like PLC logic, you know, the old Allen Bradley, GE, and all the Panucks and all that stuff. And then from there I graduated into, you know, doing, you know, overseas work and military contracts and all kinds of stuff with different companies. I eventually landed a job in a big major corporation and did that for many years. And it was during that, you know, several year stint that my wife was with me on one of those jobs. I was a field engineer and I traveled the whole world. And she's the one that said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could do something together like this and be together all the time? And I said, well, the only thing I can think of where husbands and wives work together is, and I pointed to one of those big trucks rolling down the highway. I said, maybe trucking, I don't know. She was hooked. That's all I said. I don't know what happened. But my specialty has always been the marrying of the computer to the world, to the mechanical world. In other words, that interface between the microprocessor and the memory and all this stuff's inside a computer with the motors, the controls, the arms, the actuators, the robotic, you know, moving things. Yeah. And so that interface between the two always involved PID logic and, you know, all your different, you know, servo systems, you know, your closed loop systems, open loop systems, resolvers, encoders, and all this stuff. So I was always in that part of that interface between computers and mechanical things. So when she bought this truck, I've already been in all the engine plants. I've already been in just about every manufacturing plant in this country, Canada, Mexico, Europe, I mean, like all over the world. So I've been in all these places and I've always, you know, dealt with this part of the thing. So when it comes to understanding the computers and the engines and these things, it's all based on stuff that I had been doing for years. Yeah. Because people don't invent things from scratch. They build upon what somebody else has made in earlier version or improve upon it as time and things go on. So that's sort of how I figured this box out, because I have a lot of background in, you know, RS-485, some J1939, a lot of CAN bus, Profibus, you know, all the different, you know, communications protocols I've had to deal with over the years, all the way back to RS-232 and dial-up modems and everything else that you could imagine. So it sort of falls right in place with me with this Arduino stuff. It's so cool because I can get on there, I can play with it, I can look at hex codes. I'm like, oh, well, this is obviously this and this is obviously that, and it kind of over time, that's how I figured this stuff out. Just, you know, because my background's in it, it wasn't that hard. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's how I came up with that.
We're starting to run out of memory here, so let's go ahead and dive in and see what. All right. You said we're gonna have a problem here.
Yep. I'll show it to you.
All right, we got cut off there, but we are back.
All right, so this is manual mode now. I showed you the, you know, the PG information, PGN information, all that. Yeah. Manual mode lets me move it from 0%, which is actually the arm going this way, to 100%, which is going this way. And on the screen here, 0% will be there, and 100% will be there. So if there's a blockage, what'll happen is this, as we move this back and forth, I don't know if you can see that in the camera real well. You can see that back and forth. You can see the amount of motor current down there at the bottom of the screen. Yeah. So as we move this back and forth, that's towards 100%. That's higher in position. And then here's lower in position. But as we get to the end, it should go all the way to both ends without the motor current going up very much. So that looks really good so far, but look right there. Yeah, see how the motor current's climbing up out of control? Yeah. That's because it's either A, out of calibration, and it doesn't know where 0 is anymore, or there's an obstruction somewhere in the BG ring or in the turbo somewhere, maybe some carbon buildup or something's going on. Okay. And then we go the other way. Well, if it's a calibration issue, this thing has a certain width of range that it'll operate. Right. So if it's a calibration issue, usually you'll get the motor current will go up on one end like that because it doesn't know where 0 is, and then on the other end it'll go all the way at 100% and it just, you know, it'll be fine. Yeah. But yours has a problem actually because it won't go to either end without doing that. And if you go to this end, you can see that there's definitely an obstruction as it gets close. Look at there. It's all the way maxed out. The current is maxed out. It's not even gotten to 100%. Yeah. It actually only makes it to about what? Right. 85%. Yeah, about 83%. So you got a problem because not only is it you know, going up here, which could be a calibration issue, but it's going up in the other end too. So that means something in that turbo or in that VG ring is causing the band of where it can move to be narrower than it should.
Yeah.
There's something wrong. Okay, so one way you're going to find out is obviously take it apart, you know, maybe have the turbo inspected or something like this. I can try to recalibrate it. Trouble if I try to recalibrate it,
let me see if I can set this thing up.
the trouble is if I try to recalibrate it, if it's within a degree or two, usually it'll pass it, and it may or may not work for a while, but it may do this again. It may, in other words, whatever's the problem is, may get worse.
Yeah.
So what I'll do,
but I got a question,
is I'll try to calibrate it, and we'll see if some of that comes out of it. You obviously know you got some little issue here somewhere, but let's try to recalibrate it first before we make any assumptions.
Before we do that, I just wanted to play with his new box here. And
it catches a lot of problems.
And the thing is, I didn't know anything was going on with this. If you asked me, how's your truck doing, as you did earlier, I said, doing great.
Yeah.
The turbo seems to work fine. The boost seems to be fine. Everything seems to be fine. But I hook up to this little box and it says, whoa, everything ain't fine. Something's going on.
It's not perfect. When it gets to 0%, you know, about 1, 2, 3%. Let's find out where it is on the bottom end, actually. It's right at about, it's right at about 1%. The turbo doesn't really operate down around 1 or 2%. Usually the minimum is about 5%. And usually the maximum is about 45, 50%.
Yeah.
Going down the road, and then about 70 or 80%. Sometimes they're an engine brake, and usually about 60%. So it doesn't really see the extremes all the time. Problem with that is it doesn't see the extremes, so what happens is if you get a little bit of carbon buildup behind that VG ring, now something's asking it to go that far because it's built up back there. It tends to find it.
Now, what causes the carbon? What would cause the carbon buildup in the turbo?
Just you know, emissions issues. You know, IMAP sensor not being changed regularly. You know, soot problems in the engine. Somebody not doing EGR tune-up on it and things like this, and allowing excess soot to get down.
Basically, just negligence.
Negligence, of the emission system and the EGR system. That's generally what gets these engines. You know, everybody's well known. You know, they'll give emissions code and EGR codes if you don't keep after them once or twice a year.
Right.
With, you know, just the basic sensors and cleaning the stuff. So that's probably, you know, you bought the truck used, so who knows how many. Did it have the IMAP sensor? Was it painted red when you got it?
Yeah, it's original.
That's probably why you may have some issues here. So you know, somebody probably ran it with the original IMAP sensor, which usually needs to be changed every year or two, and just completely neglected the engine, and then expected it to, you know, perform without doing anything but changing the oil, which is, you know, is a pipe dream in today's world. But anyways, so it's got some issue. Now let's try to recalibrate it. I'm curious to see if we recalibrate it, if some of it comes out of it. Let's do an install, and
so with your little box right here that you designed, you can calibrate it as well.
Yeah, it's sitting at 5%. The 5% is the position it's in when you install the turbo down onto the actuator, or down onto the turbo. There's two calibrations. There's one that pre-positions the actuator at 5% on these whole set 451 VEs. And then, of course, you know, the manual tells you to position the arm to the same position using that little hole in the top. I got a video on how to do that.
Yeah.
So the first calibration you do with the actuator off the turbo, it sets it at 5%. And then you set it down on here and do the second calibration. The second calibration actually checks the span and passes or fails it, and also resets the 0 points.
Yeah.
So that's what the second calibration does. So I'm just going to do the second calibration to see if it resets the span and see if it corrects some of this.
Right.
It probably won't, because it's such, you know, it's already hanging up at 85%. I think it's going to fail it, but we'll see. So we'll hit the second calibration, and you can hear it doing it. It's checking the span, and it says it calibrated it. It says it passed it. So that's interesting to me. Maybe it was way out of calibration.
Maybe.
So let's go back to manual mode.
That could be good news.
Yeah, maybe.
Hold on, let's see if we can get that spike in here, or the little.
Maybe it was just out of calibration. Maybe somebody never calibrated it properly. You still got an issue. It's not as bad. It's sitting at okay, it's right at 99, 100% now. So it did narrow the band of operation of the turbo a little bit. You see that? I think it was out of calibration, buddy.
It's my lucky day.
Well, you do have a slight issue at the very top end. You can see it.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
It goes. Was it go up to 99.4?
It's.
I don't know if the camera's gonna pick that up, but that's pretty cool.
99.4 before it actually starts to give you something. So yeah, I think it was just way out of calibration. Yep, that looks good. That surprised me. I thought it was going to fail it.
You scared me, Ross.
Well, see what it does. It checks the span, and if the span's too narrow, because you know there's some packing in there.
Yeah.
If it's too narrow, it'll fail it. If it doesn't think it's too narrow, if it says okay, you know, it's kind of a little bit shy, but you know, still acceptable, it'll pass it.
Yeah.
So it passed it. So you're okay for now.
I thought I was about to have a $2,000 turbo rebuild.
Well, maybe at some point I would check it again in a few months.
Yeah.
To see if this has changed again, because what caused this to begin with? Did somebody not calibrate it properly when they installed it?
Maybe.
Did it get out of calibration on its own? Is there some packing in here that may be going on, or maybe there's a chunk of carbon in it somewhere?
Yeah.
You don't know, so just keep an eye on it. Check it in a month or two. Check your boost levels. You got a boost and power gauge, so keep an eye on your boost levels. Now your boost may change slightly now that this is in good calibration.
That's good.
So just
the
make
boost
sure.
seems to run higher on this engine than my last one.
Okay.
The last one I could no kidding, I could motor around with no problem.
Yeah.
But the boost is more, the turbo's been more touchy on this one. I just thought, you know, 2350 versus 2250.
Yeah, it could be, but the 2350s only should be about 32, 34 psi boost, depending on what engine mode and how you're driving it and what you've done to the engine.
Yeah, it won't. It'll max out about 31.
Yeah,
maybe 31.
Because they have a high compression ratio. They don't need as much boost as the older engines. Older engines needed 40 pounds of boost to make big power.
Yeah.
These things don't need it because they got such a high compression ratio.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, my Caterpillar friends, they're like, well, I'm pulling 65 psi. I'm like,
that's pretty
my
sad.
engine would go to pieces.
It would blow up. It would disintegrate. Yeah, you're running 16:1 or 15:8 compression ratio, 16:3 compression ratio on that big yellow beast. This thing's 18:9, 19:1.
Yeah.
This is insanely higher. So anyway, yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's put it in seek mode. And now what that does is that just automatically moves it back and forth. And then I can control the speed. Yeah, you can see that in the camera. I don't know, you've got so many reflections on this little box. I don't know if you can see that in the camera.
Hold on, let me take my hat.
And it might help a little.
Oh, the only way I can do it is where you can't see it.
I'll bend down. Oh, I can see it. But if you go nice and slow, you can see how it climbs right there.
Yeah.
And then it comes off of it. So it's got a little something going on. Like I say, I would just keep an eye on it. You know, you don't want to tear apart a $3,000 turbo just to, you know, just on a whim. And it's way up there at the high end, so it's not really going to hurt it.
Yeah.
And it's up there where it normally doesn't run, so anyway.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah, it's questionable. I would say questionable.
I'm glad we was talking about turbos, and you said, "Hey, you want to check your truck?" Absolutely. I've been waiting to see this little box anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Now, tell me how cool that is, guys.
I've had a dozen people ask me to make one for them. It's like one of those. It's like you make a sweater from yarn. Like my wife, she makes sweaters. It's like she makes a sweater. It takes her a couple months or a few weeks or this or that.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, "Well, I want to buy those." I'm like, it's kind of homemade. It's kind of. How can you justify charging somebody the amount of time you've got in it to make something if you made it yourself?
Yeah.
You know, and then other people want to make it, and then you got to make a bunch of them.
Right.
You can never make any. It's like, okay, so maybe I have a company in China make them. I don't know.
I was about to say, what you could probably
I don't know
patent that thing. Find you a company in China, mass
patent
production.
it so that somebody copies it, right? Yeah. I don't know, man. But I made one for me. I made one for a shop down the road, that works on these turbos and stuff. Yeah. And over at the shop that I visit once in a while, that I'll help out, but that's about it. It's just like,
speaking on the turbos,
just fun. It's Arduino, man. That's why he's, there's another guest we have here. He's learning how to program Arduino. I'm teaching him how to program C++. And like the style the industrial style of programming that I'm used to. My background is in industrial programming, industrial quality programming. Very different from anything I've ever seen on the YouTube or the internet, or these people's programming techniques are just like horrible. Horrible. So yeah, that's how it's programmed too. So
well, that is pretty cool. Anyway. I guess we'll go ahead and wind this one down. I just thought it'd be pretty cool to catch that on film.
Yeah. If you ever have to take it off or whatever, we'll tear the actuator apart too, and we'll
All right. Well,
we'll change,
Rawze, if
change
people...
gears and go through it, and I know how to do that, and I've done mine just to save money. I mean, extend its life a little bit, and then if you have to replace it, obviously I always recommend OEM, but
yeah,
you know, if you can, you know, mine, I took it apart after 560,000 on it.
Yeah.
That I now have. Took it apart, and I went through it and changed the gears and re-lubricated and everything, and it did it a world of good.
Yeah.
And I inspected my turbo and all that, but my turbo was passing with flying colors. I just was curious because it had so many miles.
Yeah.
You know.
That's why I was curious.
Yeah. There's my rooster. Well, it's not mine, but it's in the woods.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Now, if the guys watching this video, they want to see more about Rawze and what Rawze has to say, because I'll tell you, this is like this right here is the guy to see on Cummins engines, and everybody asks me all the time, how do you do what you do on your engine?
I'm just a guy that owns a truck, man.
This is the guy.
Tree mechanic.
This is the guy. This is the guy that taught me the little bit of knowledge I know, and I might know maybe 2% of what he does, maybe. But where can they find more information on keeping these red babies running efficient?
My website. You know, I'm not trying to advertise, but it's like 3,000 people. That's all they talk about. So
yeah,
Rawze.com, RAWZE.com. So
yeah,
it's just, you know, hardcore guys that want to own their own stuff and do their own stuff and turn their own wrenches and keep their own businesses going profitably.
Yeah.
You know.
You got to do my sign out though. My sign
well, okay,
out
what's that?
If it don't make sense, it don't make dollars.
If it don't make sense, it don't make dollars. Can I add one?
Yeah.
Don't jump over $1 to grab a dime.
No, that's right. See you, bye guys.
See you later.